I've been searched twice already, Simone said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. By female officers. This is harassment. The fluorescent lights in the booking room hummed like angry wasps. Detective Marcus Holland held the electric clippers in his hand, turning them on and off, the buzzing sound filling the cold concrete space like a threat. His partner, Officer Jake Reinhardt, leaned against the wall with his arms crossed, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. And there, handcuffed to a metal chair in the center of the room, sat Simone Baptiste. Her locks, thick, beautiful, nearly 15 years in the making, fell past her shoulders like ropes of living history. Each one told a story. Her grandmother's hands teaching her patience, her mother's songs about resilience, her own journey through law school while working 3 jobs. Those locks had witnessed her bar exam results, her first courtroom argument, her engagement to David, and the terrible night 6 months ago when he died in her arms after a traffic stop went wrong. "You know what, Simone?" Marcus said, his voice dripping with mock concern. "I think we need to do a thorough search. Protocol, you understand." "I've been searched twice already," Simone said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "By female officers. This is harassment." Jake laughed, pushing off from the wall. "Harassment? Sweetheart, you're in here for assaulting an officer. You should be grateful we're being gentle." The lie tasted bitter in Simone's mouth. She hadn't assaulted anyone. She'd been at a protest outside the courthouse, demanding transparency in police misconduct cases, specifically cases like David's, cases that got buried under administrative review and insufficient evidence. She'd been holding a sign, chanting, exercising her First Amendment right. And then Jake had gotten in her face, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath, and when she'd stepped back, he'd grabbed her wrist and twisted it behind her back so hard something popped. "Resisting arrest," he'd announced to the crowd, loud enough for his body camera to catch it. Now she was here, in this room, with these men. Marcus walked closer, the clippers still buzzing in his hand. "See, the thing is, we've had inmates smuggle contraband in their hair before. Weapons, drugs, little rolled-up papers with gang codes." He circled behind her, and Simone felt her spine go rigid. "Those things you got hanging down your back? That's a whole lot of places to hide things." "You can search them without cutting them," Simone said, and she hated how small her voice sounded. "Please." "Oh," she said, "please," Jake mocked, his voice taking on a high-pitched, cruel tone. "How polite. Didn't your boyfriend say please too? Right before he reached for his wallet?" The words hit Simone like a physical blow. David's face flashed in her mind, his hands raised, his voice calm, telling the officer he was just getting his registration. The officer's hand on his gun. The sound that came next, louder than thunder, more final than anything Simone had ever heard. "Don't you dare," Simone whispered, and something in her voice must have sounded dangerous because Marcus grabbed a handful of her locks and yanked her head back. "Don't I dare what?" he said, his face inches from hers. "Teach you some respect? Your kind always thinks the rules don't apply. Always thinks you can run your mouth, cause trouble, and walk away clean." "Your kind." The words hung in the air like smoke. Simone closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, who'd taught her to never let them see you break. She thought about her grandmother, who'd survived Jim Crow with her dignity intact. She thought about David, who'd believed so deeply in the system, in justice, in the idea that if you did everything right, you'd be protected. He'd been wrong. The clippers touched her scalp, and Simone heard Jake laugh, a sound so casual, so devoid of humanity, that it would echo in her nightmares for years. Marcus moved the blade through her locks like he was mowing grass, each pass sending another piece of her history tumbling to the floor. Simone kept her eyes closed, kept her breathing steady, refused to give them the satisfaction of her tears. But inside, something was happening. Something cold and precise was crystallizing in the center of her chest, sharp as a blade, patient as winter. It wasn't rage, Rage was hot and chaotic and made you careless. This was something else. This was a promise she made to herself, in the silence behind her closed eyes, while her locks fell like dead soldiers around the chair legs. I will remember your faces. I will remember your names. And one day, when you least expect it, I will make sure you answer for this. When they were done, Marcus brushed the loose hair off her shoulders with exaggerated gentleness. There, all cleaned up. Don't you look more civilized now? Jake pulled out his phone and snapped a photo. For the record, he said, but his grin told the real story. This photo would circulate, in the break room, in the group chats. Another black woman humiliated. Another story to laugh about over beers. They uncuffed her from the chair and processed her out. The charges, assault on an officer, resisting arrest, would be dropped within 48 hours. The district attorney's office would quietly admit there was no evidence. The police department would issue no apology, no acknowledgement. It would be like it never happened, except for the fact that Simone Baptiste's locks were gone, and her faith in the system David had loved so much had died along with him. 3 weeks later, Simone stood in her bathroom, staring at her reflection. Her scalp, once covered, was now visible beneath a short natural cut she'd trimmed herself. She looked different, harder, older. She ran her hand over her head and felt the absence of weight, the ghost sensation of locks that no longer fell across her shoulders. Her phone buzzed. A text from her best friend, Monica. You coming to the rally tomorrow? Simone typed back, no. Monica called immediately. What do you mean, no? Girl, we need you. You're the one who organized half these protests. I'm done with protests, Simone said, her voice flat. Done? After what they did to you? After David? Simone, we can't let them… Let them what, Mon? Get away with it? They already have. They always have. Marching and chanting and holding signs. It doesn't change anything. You know what changes things? Power. Legal power. The kind that makes them sweat when they see you coming. There was a long pause. Then Monica said quietly, What are you going to do? Simone looked at herself in the mirror again. At the woman she'd become in that booking room, when her locks fell and something harder grew in their place. I'm going to become the thing they fear most. I'm going back to court. But this time, I'm not going as a protester or a victim or someone begging for scraps of justice. I'm going as a judge. Monica laughed, but it was uncertain. Simone, becoming a judge takes years, connections, political capital, and after your arrest record… The charges were dropped. My record's clean. And you're right. It'll take years. Good, I'm patient. She thought about Marcus Holland's face as he'd held the clippers. Jake Reinhardt's laugh. I'm very, very patient. And that was how it started. Not with rage, not with revenge fantasies or violent dreams, but with a decision as cold and calculated as a chess move. Simone Baptiste enrolled in every judicial seminar, every legal workshop, every networking event she could find. She joined the right organizations, impressed the right mentors, volunteered for every high-profile case that would get her name in front of the Judicial Nominating Commission. She smiled at cocktail parties where judges and politicians discussed the complexities of police reform. She nodded thoughtfully when senior attorneys talked about balancing public safety with civil liberties, which was code for letting cops do whatever they wanted. She played the game perfectly, because she understood something fundamental. You can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools, but you can sure as hell learn to use those tools better than he ever did. 5 years passed. Simone built a reputation as a brilliant attorney, unflappable in court, razor-sharp in her arguments. She won cases that seemed unwinnable. She defended clients that other lawyers wouldn't touch. And quietly, methodically, she compiled a list. Officers with excessive force complaints, detectives with histories of rights violations, cops who'd been shuffled from precinct to precinct because their departments didn't want the liability, but couldn't be bothered to actually fire them. She memorized names, badge numbers, case files, She became an expert in police misconduct law, the kind of expert that civil rights organizations called when they needed consultation. And then, finally, the call came. The governor's office. A vacancy on the county circuit court bench. Would she be interested in being considered? Would she be interested? Simone said yes with a calm that surprised even her. The vetting process was brutal. Background checks, interviews, public hearings. But she was ready. More than ready. She answered every question with poise. She presented as exactly what they wanted. Intelligent, experienced, moderate enough not to scare the conservatives, progressive enough to satisfy the liberals. A black woman who'd overcome adversity. They ate that narrative up, but who wouldn't be too radical once she had the gavel. Fools, she thought, smiling for the cameras. You have no idea who you're appointing. 6 months after her nomination, Judge Simone Baptiste took the bench for the first time. The courtroom was packed with well-wishers, supporters, family. Her mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Monica was there, grinning wide. And somewhere, Simone knew, David was watching too. She wore her robe like armor, sat in the chair like a throne. And when she looked out at the courtroom, at the lawyers and defendants and spectators, she felt something shift in the universe. Power. Real power. The kind that could change lives with a signature, with a ruling, with a single word. But what happened next? What brought Marcus Holland and Jake Reinhardt into her courtroom 3 months later? That shocked everyone who thought they knew Judge Baptiste. That shocked the entire city. The prosecuting attorney was nervous. Simone could tell by the way his hand shook slightly as he shuffled his papers. By the way, he avoided looking directly at the defense table where Marcus Holland and Jake Reinhardt sat in their dress uniforms, badges gleaming, faces carved from stone. This was supposed to be routine. A civil rights violation case, sure, but the kind that usually got pleaded down or dismissed on qualified immunity. Cops roughing up a suspect, in this case, a 19-year-old black kid named Terrence Shaw, who'd been stopped for matching a description and ended up with 3 broken ribs and a concussion. Terrence's crime? Walking home from his shift at Burger King in the wrong neighborhood. His real crime? Talking back when Holland asked him where he was really going. The whole thing had been caught on surveillance cameras from a nearby bodega. Holland slamming Terrence against a car. Reinhardt delivering kicks when the boy was already on the ground. Both officers claimed Terrence had lunged at them, appeared threatening, refused to comply. The usual script. What made this different was that Terrence's aunt was a community organizer who knew how to work the media. The video had gone viral, protests had erupted, and now the department couldn't just sweep it under the rug. They'd been forced to charge their own, but charging and convicting were 2 different things. Everyone knew that. The defense attorney, a slick former prosecutor named Richard Carlisle, who specialized in defending cops, knew it. The prosecution knew it. Holland and Reinhardt knew it. They just didn't know who their judge was. When Simone walked into the courtroom that first day of pretrial hearings, she moved with measured grace. She'd styled her natural hair into an elegant tapered cut, her edges laid perfectly, her robe pressed and sharp. She looked like every other judge, professional, composed, neutral. She took her seat, arranged her papers, and looked up at the courtroom. Her eyes landed on Marcus Holland first. He was older now, a few more lines around his eyes, but his face was the same. That same smirk lurking just beneath the surface of his professional mask. Then Jake Reinhardt. Heavier now, his uniform stretched tight across his belly, but still wearing that casual cruelty in his expression. They didn't recognize her. Why would they? The woman they'd humiliated had locs, had been scared, had been helpless in a booking room. This woman was a judge with a gavel and the full weight of the law behind her. Simone let them sit in their ignorance for a moment longer. Then she spoke. All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Simone Baptiste presiding. She watched as her name hit them. Watched as Holland's head snapped up, his eyes going wide. Watched as Reinhardt's face went pale, then red. then pale again. Watched as they turned to each other, then to their attorney, panic flickering across their faces like sheet lightning. Carlyle stood smoothly, his voice measured. Your Honor, if I may, my clients have just brought to my attention that they may have had a prior interaction with you. In the interest of avoiding any appearance of bias, we'd like to request that you recuse yourself from this case. The courtroom went silent. Every lawyer, every clerk, every person in the gallery understood what was happening. This was the opening salvo, the first move in a chess game where the stakes were someone's freedom. Simone leaned back in her chair, her face utterly calm. Counselor, I've reviewed the case file thoroughly. I have no personal relationship with the defendants, the victim, or any of the witnesses. If your clients believe they've encountered me in some professional capacity previously, that's not grounds for recusal unless they can demonstrate actual bias. Your Honor, Carlyle pressed, his voice taking on an edge, my clients inform me that approximately 6 years ago, they arrested me during a protest, Simone finished, her voice cutting through his like a scalpel. Charges that were subsequently dropped within 48 hours due to lack of evidence. Are you suggesting, Counselor, that a judge who was falsely arrested should be disqualified from hearing cases involving those officers? Because if that's your argument, you're essentially claiming that police misconduct is a shield against judicial oversight. Carlyle's mouth opened and closed. He was good, one of the best in the city at defending cops. But he hadn't expected this. Your Honor, I'm simply saying, I know what you're saying. Simone's voice was still calm, still professional, but something in her tone made the temperature in the courtroom drop 10 degrees. You're saying that because your clients abused their authority 6 years ago, they should now be rewarded with a judge who has no understanding of how that abuse feels. Motion denied. We'll proceed with jury selection next Tuesday. Holland was on his feet. This is bullshit. You can't. The gavel came down like a gunshot. Detective Holland, you will sit down and you will remain silent in my courtroom, or I will hold you in contempt. Is that clear? Holland's face was purple with rage, but Carlyle grabbed his arm and pulled him back down into his seat. Reinhardt looked like he might throw up. As the hearing continued, Simone felt something she hadn't felt in 6 years. Not satisfaction, exactly, but a sense of balance being restored. She was scrupulously fair in her rulings, allowed every defense motion that had legal merit, denied prosecution overreach when she saw it. She was so careful, so precise, that even Carlyle couldn't legitimately claim bias. But Holland and Reinhardt knew. They knew what was coming. They knew that the woman whose locks they'd cut off, whose dignity they'd tried to strip away in a booking room, was now the woman who would decide what evidence the jury would hear, what testimony would be allowed, whether their defense of "feared for my safety" would be permitted when a 19-year-old kid armed with nothing but a fast food uniform had been beaten so badly he'd pissed blood for a week. Over the next 2 months, as the trial proceeded, Simone watched them squirm, watched Holland's marriage fall apart. His wife left him 3 weeks into the trial, taking the kids to her mother's house in Ohio. Watched Reinhardt start showing up looking haggard, like he wasn't sleeping. The pressure of a trial was one thing. The pressure of knowing your fate rested in the hands of someone you'd brutalized was something else entirely. The prosecution built their case methodically. The surveillance video, damning and clear. Terrence Shaw's medical records. Expert testimony about the physics of the injuries. How you don't get broken ribs from falling unless you're falling off a building. Character witnesses who testified about Terrence's peaceful nature. His dreams of studying engineering. His part-time job to help his mother with rent. The defense tried their usual playbook. Terrence was suspicious-looking. He'd been in a high-crime area. He'd made sudden movements. But every time Carlyle tried to introduce evidence of Terrence's past, a juvenile offense for shoplifting when he was 14, a school suspension for fighting, Simone shut it down. Unless you can demonstrate that Detective Holland and Officer Reinhardt had knowledge of these incidents at the time of the arrest, they're irrelevant to whether excessive force was used. Motion denied. When Carlyle tried to call character witnesses to testify about Holland's and Reinhardt's stellar careers, their commendations, their community service, Simone allowed it. But she also allowed the prosecution to introduce evidence of complaints against both officers. 17 for Holland over his 12-year career, 23 for Reinhardt. Most investigated and cleared by internal affairs. But the pattern was undeniable. Your Honor, Carlyle argued, these complaints were unsubstantiated. They prove nothing except that my clients worked in difficult neighborhoods where people frequently make false allegations against police. Or, Simone said coolly, they establish a pattern of behavior. The jury will decide which interpretation is more credible. The trial lasted 6 weeks. The jury, 8 women, 4 men, evenly split between Black, White, and Latino, deliberated for 3 days. When they came back, the forewoman was a Black woman in her 50s who reminded Simone of her mother. She read the verdict in a strong, clear voice. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant Marcus Holland guilty. Holland's head dropped. His attorney grabbed his shoulder. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant Jake Reinhardt guilty. Reinhardt made a sound, half sob, half gasp, that carried through the silent courtroom. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the interim, Simone received death threats. Someone spray-painted "nigger judge" on her car. The police union held a press conference denouncing her as biased, calling for an investigation into her conduct. Right-wing media personalities who'd never watched a minute of the trial called her a race hustler and a corrupt activist. Simone ignored all of it. She'd known this was coming. She'd prepared for it. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Media cameras lined the back wall. Terrence Shaw sat in the front row with his mother, his ribs healed, but his eyes still haunted. Holland's wife was conspicuously absent, but his mother was there, weeping quietly. Reinhardt's entire family had shown up. Wife, 3 kids, parents, siblings, sitting in a row like they were at a funeral. Maybe they were. Simone took the bench. The courtroom fell silent. She looked at Holland and Reinhardt, both standing before her in their civilian clothes, both looking smaller somehow without their uniforms and badges. Before I impose sentence, Simone said, I want to address something directly. There have been allegations that I've conducted this trial with bias, that I've allowed personal animus to cloud my judgment. I want to be clear. Every ruling I've made in this case has been consistent with the law and legal precedent. But I'm not going to pretend that I don't understand, on a personal level, what it means to be brutalized by police officers who believe their badge gives them the right to humiliate and harm with impunity. She paused, letting her words settle over the courtroom like snow. 6 years ago, Detective Holland and Officer Reinhardt arrested me at a protest. The charges were false and were subsequently dropped. But before I was released, these 2 men took it upon themselves to cut off my hair, my locks, which I'd been growing for 15 years, as a form of punishment and humiliation. They laughed while they did it. They took pictures. They treated my body, my dignity, and my rights as if they were nothing. The courtroom erupted. Reporters typed frantically. Holland's attorney jumped to his feet, shouting about improper statements. But Simone's gavel silenced them all. I mention this not to justify any action I've taken, but to make something clear. I know exactly who these men are. I know what they're capable of. And that knowledge has made me more careful, not less, in ensuring that this trial was conducted fairly. Because unlike them, I actually believe in the law. I believe in the Constitution. I believe that justice means treating everyone, even those who've wronged you, according to the same rules. She looked directly at Holland, then at Reinhardt. You were given a badge and a gun and asked to protect this community. Instead, you used those tools to terrorize it. You treated young Black men like enemy combatants. You beat a teenager so badly he thought he was going to die. And when you were caught, you lied about it, just like you've lied about every other person you've brutalized over your careers. Simone paused, and in that silence, she felt something release in her chest. Not the cold calculation that had sustained her for 6 years, but something warmer, something like closure. Marcus Holland, I sentence you to 5 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Jake Reinhardt, I sentence you to 4 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will also both be permanently barred from working in law enforcement in any capacity. The courtroom exploded again. Holland's mother screamed. Reinhardt's wife grabbed her children and rushed them out. The police union representatives stormed out, already on their phones, already calling for appeals and investigations. But Terrence Shaw, quiet, broken Terrence, who just wanted to walk home from work in peace, looked at Simone with tears streaming down his face. He mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Simone nodded slightly. This wasn't about revenge. It had never been about revenge. It was about something simpler and more profound, the radical act of holding power accountable. As the marshals led Holland and Reinhardt away in handcuffs, Simone gathered her papers. She had 3 more cases to hear that afternoon. The work continued. Justice, real justice, was never just one verdict, one sentence, one moment. It was the daily, grinding work of trying to bend that long arc just a little bit closer to righteousness. But as she walked out of the courtroom, past the cameras and the protesters and the supporters, Simone allowed herself the smallest smile. Sometimes the arc bent a little easier than you expected. The appeals took 18 months. 18 months of Holland's and Reinhardt's lawyers filing motion after motion, claiming judicial bias, prosecutorial misconduct, ineffective assistance of counsel, every legal trick in the book. 18 months of Simone's rulings being dissected by appellate judges who'd never had their hair cut off in a police station, who'd never lost someone they loved to a traffic stop, who'd never had to choose between swallowing injustice and fighting back. The Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld her rulings unanimously. The opinion, written by Judge Margaret Torres, a Latina woman who'd started her career as a public defender, was scathing in its dismissal of the bias claims. Judge Baptiste's disclosure of her prior interaction with the defendants was not only appropriate but exemplary, Torres wrote. Her personal experience, rather than disqualifying her, provided her with unique insight into the importance of scrupulous fairness. The record shows that she bent over backward to ensure the defendants received a fair trial. More so, perhaps, than a judge without such experience might have done. The convictions stand. By the time the appeals were exhausted, Holland had served 14 months at the Federal Correctional Institution in Cumberland, Maryland. Reinhardt had served 12 at the same facility. They were no longer corrections officers' favorites. Cops in prison rarely were. But they hadn't been killed, hadn't been beaten within an inch of their lives. They'd simply been incarcerated, the same as any other person who'd violated federal law, which was, in its own way, revolutionary. But the story didn't end with their imprisonment. Nothing ever really ends. It just transforms, shifts shape, becomes something new. Simone sat in her chambers on a Thursday afternoon, reviewing briefs for the next day's docket, when her clerk knocked softly. "Judge? There's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. His name is Marcus Holland." Simone's pen stopped moving. She set it down carefully, aware that her hand wanted to shake, refusing to let it. "He's out?" "Early release for good behavior. He's been out 3 weeks." Of course he had. The system was always more forgiving to those who'd once worn a badge. Simone had sentenced him to 5 years. He'd serve less than 2. "Does he seem threatening?" "No, ma'am. He's respectful, quiet. He asked if you'd be willing to hear him out for 5 minutes. I can have security remove him if you'd prefer." Simone considered. Every ounce of common sense told her to say yes, have him removed, maintain appropriate boundaries. But curiosity, and something else, something that felt like the need for a final chapter, made her pause. "I'll see him, but have Officer Chen wait outside the door." "Yes, ma'am." Marcus Holland looked different. Prison had carved the arrogance out of his face, left something rawer behind. He'd lost weight, his shoulders less broad, his presence somehow diminished. He wore civilian clothes, jeans and a button-up shirt, but they hung on him like he was still figuring out how to be a person without a uniform. He stood just inside the door, not approaching her desk, his hands loose at his sides in a posture that was careful not to seem threatening. "Judge Baptiste," he said, and his voice was different too, rougher, quieter. "Thank you for seeing me." Simone gestured to the chair across from her desk. "You have 5 minutes." He sat, and for a long moment, he just looked at his hands. When he finally spoke, the words came slow, like they were being pulled from somewhere deep. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to believe me, but I needed to say this to your face. I'm sorry for what I did 6 years ago in that booking room, for what I did to Terrence Shaw, for every person I hurt because I thought the badge meant I could." Simone studied him, looking for the lie, the angle, the manipulation. But all she saw was a man who'd had 2 years to think about his choices and didn't like what he'd found. "Why are you here, Marcus? You think an apology erases what you did?" "No." He shook his head. "Nothing erases it. I have to live with it. But I wanted you to know that what happened in your courtroom, the trial, the sentence, all of it, it broke something in me. Something that needed to break." "Good," Simone said, and there was no warmth in her voice. "You spent 12 years breaking other people. You earned a little breaking of your own." "I know." He looked up, met her eyes for the first time. "I have a son. He's 14 now. I haven't seen him since before the trial. His mother won't let me near him, and I don't blame her. But I write him letters, every week, telling him about the things I did wrong, the ways I let power corrupt me, hoping that maybe someday he'll read them and learn something." "What do you want from me?" Simone asked. "Absolution? Permission to feel better about yourself?" "I want you to know that what you did mattered. Not just the sentence, the whole thing. You held up a mirror and you made me look at what I'd become. Most people never get that. They go their whole lives never having to face the damage they cause." Simone leaned back in her chair. She thought about David, who'd never gotten an apology from the officer who killed him. Thought about Terrence Shaw, who'd carry those broken ribs in his body memory forever. Thought about every black person who'd been humiliated, brutalized, killed by people like Marcus Holland, and never received even the smallest acknowledgement of their humanity. "You want to know what matters, Marcus? What really matters isn't your feelings about what you did. It's what you do next. You've served less than 2 years of a 5-year sentence. You'll get off supervised release in a few years, and then you'll be free to live whatever life you build. Meanwhile, the people you hurt carry that damage forever." "I know." "Do you? Because here's what I need you to understand. This isn't a redemption story. You don't get to have a moment of insight, feel bad about your choices, and then walk off into the sunset as a better person. Redemption is work. Daily work. For the rest of your life. And it doesn't mean you get forgiven. It means you accept that you might never be, and you do the work anyway." Marcus nodded slowly. "What kind of work?" And here, Simone made a choice. She could send him away, close this chapter, never think about Marcus Holland again. Or she could do something harder, something that felt like multiplying the impact of her courtroom beyond just one verdict. There's a community organization called Restorative Pathways. They work with former offenders, former gang members, former cops, people who've done harm and want to make amends. They go into schools, prisons, community centers, tell their stories, try to break the cycles they were part of. You want to do work that matters? Start there. Marcus pulled out his phone, typed the name in his notes. Restorative Pathways. "And Marcus?" Simone's voice stopped him as he stood to leave. "If I ever hear about you putting your hands on someone again, if I ever hear about you abusing power in any context, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you serve every single day of your suspended sentence, plus whatever new charges apply. Am I clear?" "Crystal clear, Your Honor." After he left, Simone sat in the silence of her chambers for a long time. She didn't feel victorious, didn't feel satisfied. She felt something more complex, a sense of a chapter closing, a weight shifting, the world recalibrating into a slightly different configuration. Her phone rang. Monica's name flashed on the screen. "Hey girl, you still coming to Terrence's graduation tomorrow?" Simone had almost forgotten. Terrence Shaw, despite everything, had finished his engineering degree, was graduating from state with honors. He'd invited her personally, said he wanted her there to see that he'd made it, that they hadn't broken him permanently. "I'll be there," Simone said. The graduation was held in the university's largest auditorium, packed with families and friends, and the nervous energy of young people about to enter the world. Simone sat near the back, not wanting to make a spectacle, but Terrence spotted her anyway. When his name was called, Terrence Michael Shaw, Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering, magna cum laude. He walked across that stage with his head high, accepted his diploma, and then did something unexpected. He looked right at where Simone was sitting and mouthed, "We did it. We, not I. We," because he understood something fundamental. Justice wasn't a solo act. It was a community effort, a collective rising, a chorus of voices insisting that things could be different. After the ceremony, Simone made her way through the crowd to where Terrence stood with his mother and aunt, all of them crying happy tears. Mrs. Shaw grabbed Simone's hands. "Judge Baptiste, I don't have words. You gave my boy his life back." "He gave himself his life back," Simone corrected gently. "I just made sure the people who tried to take it faced consequences." Terrence hugged her, quick and tight. "I'm gonna make it count," he said. "Every day. I promise. I know you will." As Simone drove home that evening, the city lights blurring past her window, she thought about trajectories. How a single moment, a protest, an arrest, an act of cruelty, could send a life careening in unexpected directions. How she'd gone into that booking room as one person and come out as someone else. How she'd taken that transformation and turned it into power, and then used that power not for personal revenge, but for something larger. She thought about David, who'd believed in the system even when the system failed him. Maybe he'd been naive, but maybe he'd been right too, in his own way. The system was broken, but it wasn't beyond repair. It required people willing to work within it, to demand better, to hold it accountable. It required judges who remembered what it felt like to have their dignity stripped away. It required lawyers willing to fight uphill battles. It required young men like Terrence, who refused to be broken. It required communities who wouldn't let injustice hide in the shadows. Simone pulled into her driveway, sat in her car for a moment before going inside. She ran her hand over her natural hair, longer now than that first desperate cut in her bathroom, styled into twists that she actually loved. Different from her locks, but beautiful in their own way. A reminder that transformation wasn't always trauma. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Judge Baptiste, this is Jake Reinhardt. I know I have no right to contact you. Marcus told me he went to see you. I'm not asking for a meeting. I just wanted you to know that I think about what I did every single day. I think about Terrence Shaw. I think about you. I'm working at a warehouse now, living in a halfway house. I don't know if I'll ever be able to make things right, but I'm trying to figure out how to be a better person, that's all. I won't contact you again." Simone stared at the message for a long time. Her finger hovered over the delete button. Then, surprising herself, she typed, "Actions speak louder than words. Prove it with how you live." She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Inside her house, Simone poured herself a glass of wine and sat on her couch, letting the day settle over her. The walls of her living room were covered with photos. Her grandmother, her mother, David smiling in that way he had, arms around her shoulders. And newer photos, too. Her swearing-in ceremony, Terrence Shaw and his mother at the trial, Monica at a rally holding a sign that read, "Justice delayed is justice denied." Her landline rang. Old-fashioned, yes, but some habits died hard. Her mother's voice came through warm and strong. Baby girl, I saw the news about those officers being released early. You okay? I'm okay, Mama. You sure? Because I know how hard you worked on that case. And if those men think they can just— Mama! Simone smiled despite herself. I'm really okay. One of them came to apologize today. It wasn't what I expected. There was a pause. Then her mother said, Your grandmother used to say that the hardest thing in the world is to stay soft when the world tries to make you hard. You know what I think is even harder? Knowing when to be soft and when to be steel. You figured that out, baby. You figured out how to be both. After they hung up, Simone sat in the quiet of her house and let herself feel everything she'd been holding back. The grief for David that never fully went away. The pride in what she'd accomplished. The exhaustion from fighting battles every single day. The hope that maybe, just maybe, things could actually change. 6 months later, Simone sat in a different kind of courtroom, a panel discussion at a national judicial conference titled Judges of Color and the Question of Bias. She was one of 5 panelists, all of them judges who'd faced similar accusations, all of them black or brown people who'd dared to hold the system accountable. The moderator, a white law professor from Harvard, posed the question everyone was thinking. Judge Baptiste, your case attracted significant media attention and criticism. Some argued that your personal history with the defendants should have disqualified you. How do you respond to those who say that judges with lived experience of police misconduct can't be impartial? Simone leaned forward, her voice clear and measured. I'd flip that question around. How can judges who've never experienced the reality of police misconduct truly be impartial? When you've lived in a world where badge and uniform always mean protection and service, you can't fully understand what it means to live in a world where those same symbols mean threat and danger. My experience didn't make me biased. It made me informed. A ripple went through the audience. Some nodding, some uncomfortable shifting. But here's what I want to be clear about, Simone continued. I didn't sentence those officers because of what they did to me. I sentenced them based on the evidence of what they did to Terrence Shaw, based on their pattern of behavior, based on the law. If anything, my personal experience made me more careful, more meticulous, more determined to ensure that the process was beyond reproach. Because I knew people would be watching. I knew that if I made even the smallest mistake, it would be used to discredit not just me, but every judge of color who dares to hold power accountable. Another panelist, Judge Raymond Washington from Chicago, jumped in. And that's the trap they set for us, isn't it? We have to be perfect. We have to be twice as qualified, twice as careful, twice as restrained. White judges can have sympathies, can have perspectives, can have experiences that shape their worldview. But the moment we bring our lived reality into the courtroom, it's called bias. The audience broke into applause. Not everyone. There were still uncomfortable faces, still people who couldn't quite reconcile the idea that justice might require judges who actually understood injustice. But enough. Enough to know that something was shifting. After the panel, a young black woman approached Simone. She looked about 25, wearing a sharp suit, carrying a briefcase. Judge Baptiste? I'm Sierra. I'm a second-year law student at Howard. I just wanted to say— Her voice cracked slightly. I wanted to say that I almost dropped out last year. I was tired. Tired of being told I was too emotional, too angry, too focused on identity politics when I talked about criminal justice reform. But then I read about your case, about how you became a judge specifically to make change from the inside, and I decided to stay. I'm going to do what you did. I'm going to get on that bench, and I'm going to make sure that people like Terrence Shaw don't have to pray for luck when they enter a courtroom. Simone felt something break open in her chest. Not pain this time, but something closer to joy. Then you better study hard. The bar exam doesn't care about your intentions, only your preparation. Sierra grinned. Yes, ma'am, I will. As she walked away, Simone thought about legacy, about how one act of courage could inspire another, could ripple outward in ways you'd never predict. She thought about all the Sierras out there, young people who were watching, learning, preparing to pick up the torch and carry it further than the generation before could dream. 1 year after that, Simone's Courtroom was featured in a documentary called Reclaiming the Gavel: Judges Who Changed the System. The filmmakers had followed several judges of color who'd made controversial rulings, faced backlash, and stood their ground. Simone's segment included interviews with Terrence Shaw, now working as an engineer for a major aerospace company, with Marcus Holland, who'd been working with restorative pathways for 18 months and had spoken at 15 schools about the dangers of unchecked power. Even Jake Reinhardt appeared, though he was less articulate, still struggling to put words to his transformation. The documentary aired on PBS and Netflix. It sparked conversations in law schools, police academies, community centers. Some people praised it, others called it propaganda. But no one could ignore it. Simone watched it alone in her living room, and when her segment ended, with footage of her presiding over a courtroom full of young people on a field trip, explaining how the law worked, why it mattered, how they could be part of making it better, she saw something on her own face that surprised her. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, not the end of the fight, but the peace that comes from knowing you've used your pain to create something meaningful, that you've taken the worst moment of your life and transformed it into a catalyst for change. Her doorbell rang. Monica, carrying takeout and a bottle of wine. Documentary watch party for one is sad, girl. I'm here to celebrate you properly. They ate pad thai and drank too much wine and laughed about the time Monica had tried to set Simone up on a date with another lawyer, which had ended with the man explaining qualified immunity to her like she hadn't written an entire legal brief on the subject. You need to get back out there, Monica said. David wouldn't want you alone forever. I'm not alone, Simone said, gesturing at the room, at Monica, at the life she'd built. I have purpose. I have work that matters. I have people I love. That's not nothing. It's not everything either, Simone smiled. Maybe, but it's enough for now. 5 years after the trial, Simone received an invitation to speak at David's alma mater, the same college where he'd majored in criminal justice, where he'd believed so deeply in the possibility of good cops making good choices. The irony wasn't lost on her. She accepted. The auditorium was full of criminal justice students, bright-eyed and idealistic, not yet beaten down by the reality of a broken system. Simone stood at the podium and looked out at them, these young people who still believed they could be the change. My fiancé graduated from this college 15 years ago, she began. He believed that good people in law enforcement could transform the system from the inside. He believed that if you followed the rules, respected people's rights, and always chose integrity over convenience, you'd be rewarded. He believed, fundamentally, in justice. She paused, letting them sit with that. 6 years ago, he was killed during a traffic stop. He'd done everything right, hands visible, voice calm, movements slow and deliberate. It didn't matter. The officer was scared, or angry, or just having a bad day. And my fiancé died because someone with a gun and a badge made a split-second decision that ended his life and destroyed mine. The room was silent. Some students had tears in their eyes. I'm telling you this not to discourage you from your chosen field. I'm telling you this because you need to understand something. The system is broken. Deeply, fundamentally broken. And if you're going into law enforcement, or law, or any position of power, you have 2 choices. You can be part of maintaining that brokenness, protecting bad cops, excusing misconduct, hiding behind officer safety and split-second decisions to justify the unjustifiable. Or you can be part of fixing it. She gripped the podium, her voice strengthening. Being part of the solution is harder. It means speaking up when your partner uses excessive force. It means testifying truthfully, even when it costs you promotions. It means refusing to participate in the code of silence that protects abusers. It means risking your career, your reputation, maybe even your safety to do what's right. Most people aren't willing to pay that price. Most people choose their comfort over other people's lives. A hand went up. A young black man in the third row. So what do we do? How do we fix it? Simone smiled, and it was sad and proud and hopeful all at once. You fix it by being the kind of officer David was trying to be, by being the kind of judge I'm trying to be, by showing up every day and refusing to accept injustice as inevitable. You fix it by building coalitions with the communities you serve, by demanding accountability from your colleagues, by remembering that every person you encounter, no matter their race, their class, their criminal history, is someone's son, someone's daughter, someone who deserves to be treated with dignity. Another hand. A young Latina woman. But what if we can't change it? What if the system is too corrupt, too entrenched? Then you fight anyway, Simone said simply. Because the alternative is giving up, and giving up means more Terrence Shaws get beaten, more Davids get killed, more people like me have to stand in booking rooms and have their humanity stripped away by people who think power means they can do whatever they want. You fight because it's right. Not because you're guaranteed to win. After the speech, students lined up to talk to her, to shake her hand, to promise they'd be different. She wanted to believe them all, but she'd learned to temper hope with realism. Some of them would become good cops, good lawyers, good judges. Others would be corrupted by the system, would learn to justify the unjustifiable, would become the very thing they'd sworn to fight. But if even a few of them held on to their integrity, if even a handful became the kind of people who'd stand up to Marcus Holland instead of laughing along with him, then maybe things could actually change. 10 years after that day in the booking room, Simone sat in her chambers reviewing a case that made her stomach hurt. Another police misconduct case. Another black teenager. Another set of officers claiming they'd feared for their safety. Another family destroyed by split-second decisions that somehow always seemed to go one way. This time, though, something was different. One of the officers had broken ranks, had testified against his partner, had said clearly and on the record, "I saw him plant that evidence. I saw him lie in his report, and I can't be part of that anymore." His name was Officer Michael Chen, the same Chen who'd stood outside her door when Marcus Holland came to apologize. He'd been a rookie then. Now he was a 7-year veteran who decided that his conscience mattered more than his career. Simone called him into her chambers before the hearing. "Officer Chen, I want you to understand what you're doing. Testifying against another officer will likely end your career in law enforcement. You'll be labeled a rat, a traitor. You'll receive threats. Your life will be difficult." Chen met her eyes. He was young still, maybe 30, but his face had the kind of gravity that came from making hard choices. "I know, Your Honor, but I became a cop because of a story I heard about a judge who'd been abused by police officers and, instead of becoming bitter, became the kind of judge who made sure people got fair trials. I figured if she could do that, I could at least tell the truth on the stand." Simone felt something catch in her throat. "That's a nice story, Officer Chen, but truth-telling doesn't always have happy endings." "I know, but I have a daughter now. She's 3, and I want to be able to look her in the eye when she's older and tell her that her father did the right thing, even when it was hard. Even when it cost him something." After he left, Simone sat in her chambers for a long time, thinking about ripples, about how you never knew which actions would echo forward, which words would take root, which examples would inspire someone to be brave when bravery mattered most. She thought about the booking room, about her locks falling to the floor, about the promise she'd made to herself in that moment of humiliation. She'd kept that promise, had become the thing they feared most, had used her power not for revenge but for justice, and in doing so, she'd created ripples that extended beyond any single verdict, any single case, any single life. That evening, Simone did something she rarely allowed herself. She visited David's grave, stood in front of his headstone with her hands in her pockets, and told him everything. About the trial. About Marcus Holland's apology. About Terrence Shaw's graduation. about Officer Chen's courage, about all the ways the world was still broken, and all the ways it was, inch by painful inch, getting better. "I don't know if you'd be proud of me," she said to the stone, to the memory, to the ghost of the man she'd loved. "I became harder than you ever were, more cynical, but I also became more effective. I learned to use anger as fuel instead of letting it consume me. I learned that sometimes justice requires a firm hand and a cold eye. I learned that you can love the ideal of a system while hating its current reality." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the oak tree that shaded his plot. Simone liked to think it was him, acknowledging her words, telling her it was okay. "I'm tired," she admitted. "Some days I wonder if I should step down, let someone else carry this weight. But then I think about all the Terrence Shaws who need someone who understands, all the Sierras who need someone to show them it's possible. And I realize I can't quit. Not yet. Maybe not ever." She placed her hand on the cold stone, feeling the carved letters of his name beneath her palm. "Thank you for believing in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. Thank you for loving justice, even though it failed you. Thank you for being the kind of person who made me want to be better. I miss you every day. But I'm using that missing to build something. I hope that's enough." On the 15th anniversary of David's death, 15 years since the traffic stop that had changed everything, Simone's phone rang early in the morning. An unknown number. But something told her to answer. "Judge Baptiste? This is Marcus Holland's son, Elijah. We've never met, but my dad talks about you sometimes. He asked me to call you. The boy's voice cracked. "He's in the hospital. Heart attack. He's asking for you." Simone sat up in bed, her mind racing. "Is he going to make it?" "Doctors say maybe, but he wants to see you. Says he has something important to tell you before, just in case." She shouldn't go. There was no reason to go. Marcus Holland had apologized years ago, had done his work with restorative pathways, had lived quietly since then. She owed him nothing. But something. Maybe curiosity, maybe compassion, maybe just the same instinct that had made her let him into her chambers all those years ago, made her say yes. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Marcus Holland lay in the bed, older than she remembered, grayer, smaller. Medical equipment beeped around him like a countdown clock. His son sat in the corner, a teenager now, watching his father with careful eyes. Marcus opened his eyes when Simone entered. "You came." "I came. I'm sorry to ask you here. I know you have no reason to." He coughed, and the machines beeped faster. "I just needed to tell you something. About that night. The booking room." Simone sat down, her body tense. "Marcus, we covered this years ago. You apologized. I accepted that you were sorry. We don't need to." "It wasn't just us," he interrupted, his voice urgent. "There were others. Other officers who knew what Jake and I were doing, who watched it happen and did nothing, who laughed about it later, who participated in their own versions with other people." Simone's blood went cold. "Give me names." "I can't. I won't. But I can tell you this. It was cultural. It was systemic. We thought we were untouchable. And until that trial, we were right." He grabbed her hand with surprising strength. "What you did, holding us accountable, it changed things. Not everywhere, not enough, but it changed something. The department reviews now get real oversight. Officers think twice before doing what we did. Because they saw what happened to us, and they know that maybe, just maybe, there's a judge out there who won't let them get away with it." "That shouldn't be revolutionary," Simone said quietly. "That should be the bare minimum." "I know, but it's something. It's more than there was before." He coughed again, longer this time. "I won't see my son graduate college, won't walk his sister down the aisle, won't meet my grandchildren. But at least I can die knowing that I tried to make amends, that I used whatever time I had left to be better than I was. That's your gift to me, Judge Baptiste. You gave me the chance to choose differently." After he fell asleep, Simone stood in the hallway with Elijah. The boy was 17, tall and serious, with his father's eyes, but his mother's gentle features. "He's not a good man," Elijah said suddenly. "I know that. I know what he did. My mom made sure I knew. She never wanted me to idolize him, but he's been trying, really trying. And I think that's because of you." "It's because of him," Simone corrected. "I just held him accountable. He chose what to do with that accountability." "Maybe. But my mom says that sometimes people need someone to show them who they could be before they can become it. She says you did that. Not by forgiving him, but by refusing to let him hide from what he'd done." Simone looked at this young man, this person who'd grown up in the shadow of his father's crimes, and saw resilience, saw possibility, saw another ripple extending forward. "What are you going to do, Elijah, after high school?" "Pre-law at Georgetown. I want to be a civil rights attorney. I want to prosecute cases like the one you judged. I want to make sure that what my father did to people has consequences. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem." Simone smiled, and this time it was genuine and warm. "Then study hard. The bar exam doesn't care about your good intentions." "Yes, ma'am. That's what everyone keeps telling me." Marcus Holland died 3 days later. Simone attended the funeral, sitting in the back, acknowledging no one. She watched as Elijah gave a eulogy that was honest, acknowledging his father's crimes, his attempts at redemption, the complexity of loving someone who'd done terrible things. She watched as representatives from Restorative Pathways spoke about the work Marcus had done, the lives he'd touched, the schools he'd visited. She watched as Jake Reinhardt sat in a different row, alone, his face carved from grief and guilt. After the service, Simone stood by her car, about to leave, when Reinhardt approached. He looked worse than Holland had, older, harder, like the years had been less kind to him. "I never apologized properly," he said without preamble. "I sent you that text years ago, but I never said it to your face. I'm sorry. For the booking room, for Terrence Shaw, for every person I hurt because I thought the badge made me better than them. I'm sorry." Simone studied him. Unlike Marcus, who'd found a kind of peace in his redemption work, Reinhardt looked like a man still fighting his demons. "What have you been doing, Jake, since you got out?" "Working, warehouse jobs mostly. I'm a supervisor now. I tried the restorative pathways thing like Marcus, but I couldn't." He shook his head. "I couldn't find the words the way he could. I'm not good at talking about my feelings, but I try to be different. I try to treat the people who work for me with respect. I try to remember that having power over someone doesn't give you the right to abuse them." "That's something," Simone said. "Is it enough?" She considered. "I don't know. Maybe there is no enough. Maybe you just keep trying every day, and that has to be sufficient." After he walked away, Simone sat in her car for a long time before starting the engine. She thought about endings and beginnings, about how rarely they were distinct, how they bled into each other like watercolors. She thought about the woman she'd been in that booking room, scared, humiliated, powerless, and the woman she was now, powerful, respected, feared by those who'd once feared nothing. She thought about whether she'd made the right choices, used her power wisely, balanced justice with mercy in the right proportions. She thought about David, who'd believed in redemption even for those who didn't deserve it. And she thought about tomorrow, when she'd put on her robe again and preside over more cases, make more rulings, shape more lives with the stroke of a pen and the pound of a gavel. The work continued. It always did. Justice, real justice, was never finished. It was a horizon you walked toward, but never quite reached. A promise you kept trying to fulfill, even when the world made it nearly impossible. Simone started her car and drove toward that horizon, carrying the weight of her past and the hope of her future in equal measure, knowing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to give up. Even when they try to break you, even when they laugh while they do it, even when the world tells you that nothing will ever change, you refuse to give up. And slowly, painfully, impossibly, the world shifts. Not all at once. Not perfectly, but enough. it shifts enough. If you found yourself in Judge Baptiste's position, with the power to decide the fate of people who had once humiliated and brutalized you, would you have been able to remain as fair and measured as she did? Or would the temptation for harsher justice have been too strong? Drop your honest thoughts below.